All right, let's dive into one of the oldest and, frankly, most profound stories ever told. It's this timeless look at suffering, faith, and the whole idea of justice. Today, we're unpacking the incredible story of Job. But before we even get to the man himself, we're going to start with a question that really defines his entire journey. I mean, this line comes thundering out of a whirlwind, aimed right at Job after he's been through, well, everything. This one powerful question really frames the whole epic story to come.
So, how did we even get to a divine showdown in a whirlwind? Well, our story actually begins much more peacefully, over in the land of Uz, with a man who seemed to have it all.
So this is Job, and the text makes it super clear he's blameless and upright. This is a guy who fears God and actively stays away from evil. He was also the wealthiest, most respected man in the entire region, a devoted father, and so careful about his faith that he would offer sacrifices for his kids just in case they might have sinned in their hearts. By every single measure, he was living the perfect life. But Job's perfect life down on earth, well, it becomes the topic of conversation up in a very different realm. A dialogue kicks off in the heavens that's going to set in motion this absolutely devastating test of his faith. So, up in the heavens, God points out Job's incredible righteousness to a figure known as Satan, who's acting as a sort of accuser. But Satan fires back with this really cynical challenge. He asks, does Job fear God for nothing? He's basically saying, of course he's faithful. Look at how much you've blessed him. Take it all away, and I guarantee you he'll curse you to your face. And so the wager is accepted. God gives Satan permission to destroy everything Job owns, but with one rule. You can't touch Job himself. And with that celestial agreement in place, Job's world is about to be just systematically and brutally torn apart. The stability he has known his whole life is about to vanish in just a matter of hours. The disaster hits with this breathtaking speed. It's not just one piece of bad news, it's four, delivered back to back by the lone survivors. While one messenger is still speaking, another one runs up. First, his livestock are stolen and his servants killed. Then more sheep and servants are burned up. Then his camels are stolen. And finally, in one horrifying moment, a powerful wind destroys the house where his children are, and all 10 of them are gone, just like that. In the face of this absolute, unimaginable devastation, what does Job do? He doesn't curse God. Nope. He tears his robe, shaves his head as a sign of mourning, and he falls to the ground to worship. He then says these incredible words acknowledging God's power even in the middle of tragedy. Satan's first test, it failed. But the test isn't over. Satan goes back to God, and this time he argues that Job only kept his faith because his own body was safe. Skin for skin, he says. It's an old saying that means a person will give up anything they have just to save their own life. He wagers that if Job himself is afflicted with pain, then he'll finally break. The terms are set again. God allows it, but he's firm. You must spare his life. And this brings the test to a whole new level of misery. Now it's not about losing things. It becomes deeply personal, moving from external loss to this excruciating physical pain. And that pain kicks off a long, torturous debate about why it's all happening. So Satan strikes Job with these painful sores all over his body. His suffering is so intense that he just sits in a pile of ashes, scraping his skin with a piece of broken pottery. Even his own wife tells him to just give up, curse God and die. Then his 3 friends show up, but when they see him, they are so shocked they don't say a word. They just sit there with him in total silence for 7 full days and nights. After a week of silence, the great debate begins. Job is the first to speak, and he doesn't curse God, but he curses the day he was born. He demands to know why this is happening, insisting that he's innocent. His friends, though, they all operate on this simple, rigid logic. God is just, so if you're suffering, you must have sinned. They keep insisting that he has some secret sin he needs to confess, telling him to just repent so God will restore him. But here's the thing. Through all the pain, the confusion, and the terrible advice from his friends, Job's faith never completely shatters. He argues, he complains, he questions everything, but deep down he still clings to his belief. At one point he says these powerful lines, showing a hope that goes way beyond his agonizing reality. The back and forth between Job and his friends just goes on and on and on. It's a circular argument that goes nowhere, because they're all trying to fit an infinite God into their tiny, human-sized box of logic. And then
just when it seems like no answer will ever come, the debate is suddenly silenced. Because the answer Job was so desperately looking for, it was never going to come from his friends. A new voice enters the conversation, a voice from a storm, and it changes everything. God finally speaks, but he doesn't give Job the neat and tidy explanation he wants. Instead, he unleashes this torrent of questions, starting with the very creation of the universe. "Where were you?" he asks, "when I laid the earth's foundation?" It's just this powerful, humbling reminder of the huge gap between God's perspective and our own. The questions just keep coming, moving from the earth to the stars, challenging Job's power and knowledge on a cosmic scale. You see, God isn't explaining the why of Job's suffering, he's demonstrating the who, the mind-blowing nature of the very God that Job has been questioning. God's speech kind of climaxes by pointing to these two massive, wild creatures, the behemoth and the leviathan. The message is pretty clear, right? If you can't even comprehend or control these creatures that I made, how could you possibly expect to understand the infinite wisdom of their creator? And that divine encounter, it completely reframes Job's entire perspective. The argument is officially over, and the story moves into its final phase, one of humility, reconciliation, and in the end, an unbelievable restoration. Job's response is just profound humility. He basically says, "I had heard stories about you, but now I have actually seen you for myself." And in the face of that awesome power, all his demands and his arguments just seem small. He repents, not because he finally admits to some secret sin, but for his pride in demanding an explanation from the creator of the universe. After God tells Job's friends off for their bad advice, he restores Job's fortunes. And it's not just a restoration, it's a doubling. He receives twice the number of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys that he had before. He's also blessed with 10 more children, and it's even noted that his new daughters were the most beautiful in the land. And interestingly, his fortunes are restored after he prays for the very friends who wrongly accused him. The story wraps up not just with wealth, but with a long and full life. Job lives another 140 years, long enough to see his kids, his grandkids, and their kids, dying as an old man who was full of years. And so the story ends. But it never really answers that big question, why do good people suffer? Instead, it leaves us with a much deeper, more personal challenge. It suggests that maybe faith isn't about having all the answers, but about trusting the one who does. It leaves us wondering, when the why is unknowable, what does it truly mean to have faith?